To gain that influence as a leader, people have to see the human side of you. And as humans, we all have emotions. And when you mask your emotions and you pretend everything's okay when it's not, people sense it, they pick up on it. And then that doesn't feel very authentic. And then that deteriorates trust. But when you as a leader can express your emotions to others, that builds trust. And there, it takes amount of courage to be able to do that, right? Because there is this, thought or myth that, expressing emotions makes us weak. Actually, it's opposite. Being able to express your emotions is actually strength. It's not weakness.
No rain.
Well, folks, hello and welcome back to the Naren Agarwal Show. Today's episode is going to be one filled with learning. I am so excited about it, because today's episode, we have somebody super special on board. She is a leadership success coach. She's an executive coach, and she is also an organizational psychologist. She knows how to run organizations and the psychology behind building organizations. Having said that, she has consulted companies like Boston Consulting Group, Citi Bank, Deloitte, some Indian household name companies like Reliance and Infosys. Welcoming on board Miss Jenny Hyatt. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Naren. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Jenny, I'm so excited to uncover leadership and organizational psychology with you. In your background right there, I can already see the word lead written on it. It sounds like we're about to have an amazing conversation. I'm excited.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That's one of my banners that I've used with one of the leadership journeys that I was using, teaching this last year. So I said, why not just, keep it up and let it be a constant reminder to lead. So.
That's amazing. So, Jenny, what is leadership? Let's dive straight into it. What is leadership?
Well, I'll first start with telling you what is not leadership, right? So I think so many people, think that management is leadership. And I think so many people think that leadership is a designation, something that a company says, oh, you're a senior manager or you're a VP. But that's actually not leadership, right? Leadership is not a designation or something that's on paper. So leadership is really about people that choose to follow you for who you are. Leadership is your ability to be able to, to influence others and together others working together towards a common goal. And so actually anybody can be a leader. You don't need a company to give you a designation to be a leader. Likewise, just because a company gives you a designation does not necessarily make you a leader. So people have to be willing to follow you to be a leader. So to me, this is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of leadership. It's really who you are.
Now that's amazing. And you consult big companies and you speak with executives and senior managements. And I think they also get somewhere they don't get this, right? Because they think I have a position and I'm a leader, but that doesn't just come naturally with the position. So what kind of stuff do people miss out on? What kind of stuff do they need to work upon to become a better leader?
Yeah. So I think one of the things I mentioned earlier is it's about influence and how do you gain that influence from people? And I think one of the ways that we gain that influence as a leader is to really focus on how do we serve others. So it's not about us and who we are and what position we're in and what we need to get done. It's really about how do we serve the people that are around us. So I believe our influence is in proportion to the value that we add to others. So is it what are we doing to others? That's how we actually increase our value. So we give value to get value. And to me, wow, that is what builds a person's ability to be a leader, because people, look up to you because you're being that person, because you're doing so much for them, because you're giving value to them. And so leadership is not about you. It's actually it's about others and being focused on others. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of leaders miss out on. Certainly as leaders, we have to lead ourselves and manage ourselves and we have to walk the talk. But when we're walking the talk and we're managing ourselves and being the example, we also need to, our focus is on others and how do we serve them.
That's really powerful. That's almost like a mind shift for somebody who's thinking about leadership, because you think of, like, you giving instructions, you're telling people do this, do this, do that, and here you are talking about how true leadership is actually about being there for everybody and serving others. That's awesome. What does
Yeah.
communication come into play in leadership? Like, what does communication come into play with you communicating with others, and how important that is, and what style of communication should a leader adopt?
Yeah, so actually communication is actually one of the core competencies, I think, of being a leader. And yeah, and like you were just talking about, just telling people, advising people what to do. It's again opposite of that. It's actually really being a great leader is about asking great questions. And as a leader, the ability to ask questions, of your team, and to actually think, and to think beyond your role, and to think big picture, and to think about, the overall team and the overall organization is really critical. So communication actually needs to be a two-way dialogue with everyone that you're interacting with, your stakeholders, up, down, and sideways. So it's about creating dialogues, and that is one of the key, I think, aspects of communication, is being able to have a conversation and it not just being a one-way direction. I think the other aspect of communication here is about kind of, I would say, even over communicating. So sometimes there are certain things that we might know when we're in certain positions, but if we don't share that information, I would say, in the absence of information, people tend to create information. And so one of the things that's really important as a leader is to communicate, and to really talk to people, and to tell people what's going on, and to be transparent about things, because that's what ultimately builds trust. And again, trust comes back to building your influence as a leader, is because people have to trust you to take you as their leader, and communication is part of that. And I think also, as a leader, being very clear in what you're communicating, being able to speak, in front of people, and, stand up for what is right at times as well. These are all various aspects of communication when it comes to leadership.
Wow. So, other than communication, what are some core competencies someone has to develop within themselves to be a top class leader and manage a big team?
Well, this is a really hot topic right now, and something that I've also been working with leaders on, and that is bias. So, having worked internally in positions in companies, and especially HR, one of the complaints that I would often hear is that when people were leaving the organization and we would do exit interviews, is people would say, my manager is biased. And, and of course, bias is such a hot topic right now. And so I think to be an effective leader is that, we have to be neutral, and we need to be able to treat people equally. It doesn't mean all people, we treat them the same, or that they are all the same. But what I'm saying is we need to be aware of our biases. So one of the things that I've been working with leaders on, especially the last few months, is something we call as unconscious bias. And we all have it as humans. It's not like, necessarily a bad thing, as in some people, we all have it. And the thing is, but it's important for us to be aware of what are those that we have, because each person is conditioned differently based on their upbringing, based on the things they learn from their environment, from their friends, from their parents, family members, the values they have. And all of our biases are different. And it's important to have that self-awareness as a leader to identify what are your own biases, so that you're not using those against other people. And awareness is kind of the first step, right? And then the second step is, what am I doing about it? What's the action I'm taking? Right. So a leader needs to be somebody that's being perceived as fair and unbiased. Because if people feel that you're biased, then you've already lost your influence as a leader. People will not have respect for you. And and bias comes in so many different ways. And oftentimes it's that, people in organizations where they have a leader, is they feel that no matter what I do, this leader is not going to change their perception of me. Therefore, why should I even try? So, for example, they feel that they're not going to be given growth opportunities because they already feel that bias is a fixed mindset that the leader has that's not going to change. So, I think that's one of the important things that I would say that, a leader needs to be aware of is, what biases they're
Nice.
having. Do others perceive them as being fair? And which again leads back to communicating why you've made the decisions that you're making. Otherwise, what happens is, let's say you help someone on your team get promoted, the other people will say he's biased just because they were not chosen, right? and because the person maybe hasn't really communicated what's expected to get promoted, or why this person got it rather than some other person. So there's just an assumption that that person must be biased against me. And so that's where the communication also connects. So I think this is a really important area for leaders. There's definitely more, but that's one of them.
I just love this angle that you took on this question. It's because I don't think a lot of conversation around bias is there, and I guess it's becoming a hot topic in leadership. I really loved the phrase that you used over there when you said being perceived as fair, because I feel like sometimes as a leader, you got to treat people differently, because some people, learn in a different way and some people learn in another way. But what's really important is communicating that and making sure the perception is that you are treating everybody fairly, and you're giving everybody the kind of support they need. Some people more, some people less. So I think that's really powerful for me personally as a learning. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And as we say, in psychology, is that perception is reality. So though you may not believe it's true, if others believe it's true, then they are responding to you, behaving with you, talking with you as if it's true for them. So perception is reality.
Wow, that's amazing, and you're so right. We know, like, even as humans, we have 5 senses, and these are not senses that can capture the ultimate reality of what the universe offers. But then this really forms our reality, and same way the mental perception. It really forms our reality, even though there might be a much more of a bigger reality outside. Wow.
Absolutely.
So, Jenny, what are some mistakes that you have seen? You don't have to disclose names, but like top level executives that you've consulted and coached, what are some mistakes you've seen them do and that we can learn from?
Well, I can share with you something that I especially see here in India with some of the top executives, and that is that oftentimes, especially when I work with some of the technology companies and people feel that their technical expertise is enough to take them to the next level, or to even keep them in the current position that they're in. And so a lot of leaders I have seen focus on only their technical expertise. And the reality is that there's not only just your technical expertise that you have in your job, which is very important and necessary to do your job, but there's the whole other element, which is the people element. And how do you lead people? And so you may be the best, technically strong person in your team. And I would say that is a mistake, because if you're the smartest person in your team, there's a problem. You need to surround yourself as a leader with other people who are even smarter than you. And I've seen a lot of leaders that they're afraid to hire smart people, or afraid to hire really competent people, because they're afraid that person is going to take their job. But the thing is, how do you move up to the next level if you don't have people below you that can step into your role? So that's one mistake related to that. The other one is kind of not really focusing on the people aspect, the people that they're leading, and thinking that technology and their domain expertise is enough to move them to the next level. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, that, leadership is about your ability for people to follow you. The thing is, if as a leader, if you are missing the people skills and you're not treating the people around you, in a nice way, then it's also going to be difficult for you to get the kind of support that you need to move up. And, being a coach, there's 2 reasons why I'm often called in as a coach. Sometimes the organization is being proactive and saying, hey, we want to train, all of our VPs at this level and put them through a leadership journey and, train them and coach them in various leadership skills. And they're being proactive. Now, the other place where, companies call me is when they are being reactive, where they say, hey, we have the senior leader. They worked with us for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. I've even had one. And I said, they're great in their, domain knowledge and their expertise. And, they've been such a valuable employee for so many years. However, we're getting a lot of complaints about this person and their behavior, and the team doesn't like working with them, and we're having a lot of people challenges. Can you fix them? And that's when people will call me in. So they don't call me in for technical expertise, and probably I can't do that anyway being a coach, right? But the people side of things is where those leaders are really missing out. And so I have seen many leaders get passed up for a promotion simply because of their people skills. And so one of the number one predictors of success in life is something called emotional intelligence. And that is something that, some leaders they think, oh, what is that? Emotions don't belong in the workplace, and so they think, oh, that's not for me. I have my technical expertise. But actually that is so important, right? And maybe I can share with you a little bit about what is emotional intelligence.
Please.
So, so emotional intelligence is really our ability to be aware of our emotions, to be able to label what we're feeling, to be able to regulate those emotions, and also the awareness of emotions in others. How are others feeling when I've had a particular interaction or something has happened with them? How are they feeling? And then what is the right kind of response or way that I should correspond with this person based on how they are feeling. And so it's really all about, the emotional awareness and regulation. And so it has to do first with self and identifying how you're feeling and how do you regulate your emotions. So some of these leaders that I've had to, work with have been leaders that are lacking emotional intelligence. So they might be aware that they're angry, and but maybe they're getting angry and they're throwing stuff in the office and making other people uncomfortable, right? So that means that they're lacking the regulation part. Or maybe other people on their team are having particular emotion, but the person's not being very empathetic or sensitive in their interaction with that person. So this idea of emotional intelligence, a lot of research has been done on it, and it is the number one predictor of success. So you may be the smartest, we used to oftentimes think, IQ is the biggest predictor of success. But what I say is what got you here won't get you there. So your IQ or your technical expertise might have gotten you to a certain level, but that's not what's going to take you, even further.
Wow, it's almost like it's a catalyst for your growth, because it might not be directly related to the job responsibilities, but it acts as that catalyst that takes you to a whole another level of reaction and the progress you need in the chain of reactions, if you can call it so. How can one build their emotional intelligence? What are some things they could do to build their emotional intelligence?
Yes. So there's, I think one of the ways to start with is to start with being a little bit more mindful and noticing in the moment, like, how am I actually feeling, and being able to label that emotion. So, is it just like, okay, instead of, you'll hear people say, bad, I'm feeling bad. Like if you talk to a little kid and you say, how are you feeling? They'll say, I'm feeling bad, because they don't have the vocabulary to really express it, right? So I think, as adults, we have to increase our vocabulary of emotions. So am I feeling angry? Am I feeling disgusted? Am I feeling, annoyed? Am I feeling frustrated? So there's kind of these various levels of, emotions, and being really aware of, how do we distinguish between those ones, and increasing our, emotional vocabulary is important. And I think the other thing is that, emotions are a clue that some need is not being met. So if I am feeling a particular emotion, I should be able to identify what's the human need behind that, which is not being met, that is resulting in that emotion. Or if it's a more, what do we say, positive emotion, what need is being met. So for example, let's say you don't promote me, for example, and I'm feeling sad about it. What is the unmet need there? Probably I'm not feeling recognized for all the hard work.
Significance, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that significance. I'm not feeling that importance. I'm not feeling good enough, whatever it is. So if we can identify exactly what is that need behind it, it helps us to make meaning of that emotion and increases our overall awareness of why we're feeling that way. And then I think it's really about what is the story that we're telling ourselves around that. So if the story is, I'm only good enough if my, if somebody recognizes my performance and promotes me. Is that really the story that I want to tell myself? Or is it that, you know what, I'm not ready this time, but I've still got some things I need to work on, which I can work on, that I can, prepare for, let's say 6 months from now or 1 year from now. So the story that we're telling ourselves around that situation also is going to impact how we feel about it, and whether we're really being in a victim mode and this thing was done to me, or whether I'm feeling in an empowered mode where I feel that I have the ability to change my future and to impact and influence the way things will go in the future. That can have a big, impact on the overall emotional intelligence, is being aware of the story that we're telling ourselves. And I think when it comes to others, emotional intelligence is when you're listening to people and you're hearing the words they say. At one level, you're listening for the facts and the information and you're hearing what they're saying. But I would say, from a listening perspective, you need to listen a little bit deeper and really ask yourself, based on what this person told me, what am I hearing about how this person is feeling?
What's in between the lines over there?
Yes, which means that one of the other competencies that we need as leaders is really good listening skills. Because as humans and the people we're dealing with, everyone has a need to be seen and to be heard. So as a leader, if you want to be more influential, you really need to be able to hear people around you. So being able to hear something people said and say, wow, that must be really frustrating for you, or wow, that must be, really disheartening for you. And to kind of identify that emotion, label it, and I would say do kind of what I say, an emotional guess, and and you look for the response of the other person. If the person's like, yeah, I'm really disheartened, or no, you know what, I'm not disheartened, I'm really angry. Okay, so then you're not really calibrating right, but you're still checking in with the person and acknowledging how they're feeling. And so it's really identifying, what others are needing and what they're saying, and really listening with the intent to understand rather than listening with the intent to reply. So that's
wow.
What intelligence.
That's amazing. About leadership, one last question, Jenny.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people say that emotions are a weakness. Emotions are weakness, and top level leaders, you need to be hardcore. People take examples of Steve Jobs and say how hardcore he was. What do you think about this? Does that work in the 21st century modern day of leadership? Does that work in the factory age? What's your opinion on this kind of talk?
No. So I think, again, to gain that influence as a leader, people have to see the human side of you. And as humans, we all have emotions. And when you mask your emotions and you pretend everything's okay when it's not, people sense it. They pick up on it. And then that doesn't feel very authentic. And then that deteriorates trust. But when you, as a leader, can express your emotions to others, that builds trust. And there, it takes amount of courage to be able to do that, right? Because there is this, thought or myth that, expressing emotions makes us weak. Actually, it's opposite. Being able to express your emotions is actually strength. It's not weakness, because
That's awesome. What a great perspective.
You're not worried or fearful about what are other people thinking about it. You are being who you are and what you are feeling. So I would say actually there is strength in vulnerability, and being able to be vulnerable and to say, this is how I felt, or this is how I'm feeling. That is strength, and that is courage, and that builds trust, because people see you as a human, right? So you gave that example of Steve Jobs, and I will say, while Steve might have been, straightforward and a very direct kind of communicator, it also impacted him, right? He lost his job from the company he started at one point, right? Because of that. Yes, later on, he might have brought him back, but not everybody will get brought back, right? So I think, we do need to be, emotionally intelligent. And, I think even more so now during these, lockdown times where we're here and teams are working virtually and we're not able to see people in person and build those, connections and relationship that we would normally build in person. All the more reason as leaders that we need to reach out more to our team, that we need to communicate more to them, that we need to, ask them questions and how things are going, and listen to them and kind of empathize with them, because, they're going through an adjustment themselves as well. Everyone is, right? Because they're working from home. There's family things going on in the background. There's different responsibilities without maids and cooks coming and things like this. So everybody's adjusting, right? And as humans, and we all have to adjust, and change is not easy for most humans. And as leaders, again, one of the important critical competencies of a leader is their ability to adapt. So I call it the adaptability quotient. As leaders, you have to be able to adapt to different situations. And this is something that distinguishes great leaders from average leaders, is that ability to adapt to the situation. Wow. And adapt to different people. Like you said, different, what style should we have? Well, we may have different ways of interacting with different people based on what those people need, right? Based on their skill, right, based on their competency, based on their feelings, based on their needs, etc. So our responsibility as a leader is to be able to adapt to work with all different types of people.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for those amazing answers, Jenny. And that's so much insight. I want to talk a little bit about organizational psychology. What does this mean? The psychology of running an organization, what is it about? And what are some things that we can learn from organizational psychology?
Yeah, great question. So organizational psychology, to me, is really about the human side of the business. So everything to do with people, because at the end of the day, it is people that run our business, right?
Correct.
So everything to do with, how do we hire the right people, to how do we train them and upskill them, to how do we, develop them, to how do we retain them, to how do we structure, the organizational structure of the organization, and how do the policies impact the people. So everything to do with people is really what is organizational psychology, in a way that you leverage that knowledge to be able to make the organization more, efficient and effective. So that's what I look at, is basically some of the things that we've talked about, like in terms of, leadership and emotional intelligence and things. These are all things that are, the human side that are applicable in the workplace, right? Human dynamics, right, team dynamics, relationship building. I mean, all these things, because at the end of the day, they're humans in the organization. So the more that we understand about human nature, human behavior, and how that works in a system. So we've got, also system thinking, for example, is, how do things work, in the overall system? Because it's not just a person, it's a person inside a team, inside of more teams, inside of, an organizational, right? So all these, structure of an organization also has an impact on people. So that is basically what is, organizational psychology in a, I guess, a simplistic fashion.
Yeah, that sounds like a very intriguing study in science. Is running a big organization, leadership and organizational psychology, is it more of a science or is it more of an art? What do you think?
I think it's both. It's both an art and a science, because
yeah.
There's definitely science behind the psychology part and understanding human behavior and human nature. There's also the art part in the way that you do it for the unique context, that an organization works in. So, same company and, operating in the US or operating in India has a different cultural context, right? So those also impact things. So there's a science behind it, but there's also an art, right? Because right, human behavior is also quite, diverse and interesting and dynamic and different with every person. So there is an art piece as well.
That's awesome. Jenny, I want to talk a little bit about you and your journey, because I know you're somebody who was trained in the US, and you're originally born in the US, and then now you're living in India, in Pune, and you're a leadership coach here. How does that work? That sounds like a big transition. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you end up in India, and what was your journey growing up, and how did you get into leadership coaching?
Yes. Oh, great question. Okay. So, well, I grew up in a really small town in Alabama, and, first kind of, I guess, moved out of the state when I went to college to do my degree in psychology. And then while I was there, I got exposed to somebody who said, you can study abroad as well. And I studied in the UK for a year at Queen's University, and was able to transfer those courses back to my college. And then right after my finishing my bachelor's in psychology, I moved out to California, which was a huge change, a new state, very diverse, very progressive, and went there to do my master's in organizational psychology. So that was like the first part. And so I knew, like, when I was in college, I said, I enjoy teaching and I enjoy helping people, and I want to do that. And so, my advisor said, well, you have to go and get at least a master's degree, if not a PhD, if you want to teach in colleges and universities. And I knew I wanted to teach adults, but I said, but I'm not really sure that I want to do all the publishing and research and stuff that's required at a large university in the States. So I didn't really know what I wanted to be. And so when I went to grad school and I was in San Diego, I got a part-time job at a bank. And it was there that, one of the other employees said, hey, I'm going for this supervisory skills training. And I said, what is that? And she said, yeah, if you want to prepare to be a manager, then you've got to take these courses and learn how to handle people and manage with teams. So I said, wow, that's really interesting. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I knew from that moment that, I wanted to be a corporate trainer. And so, as soon as I finished my grad school degree, I got into a management training program, because to be a trainer, you need to be knowledgeable about the business, right? You need to have some domain expertise. So I got into a management training program at a mortgage banking company, and I got to do basically a job rotation to work in various departments and really understand the business. And I knew that that was all with the intention that I wanted to get into training. And sure enough, within a year and a half of doing that, I was offered another position actually in another mortgage banking company to help them start up a management training program. So that's kind of where it started, training and working with, people from top tier universities that were also going through a job rotation program. And so they said, you're an organizational psychologist, you got the degree, now you got the business experience, so now help us put this together. So that started my journey into training. And so I started training, people on, sales skills and customer service skills and, various, soft skills and leadership skills. And, and I had been trained in coaching, but obviously wasn't really working as a coach when I was in my young 20s. And then when I'm, in 2007, when there was a subprime mortgage crisis in the US, the company I was working for in California had already been offshoring work to a third-party vendor here in India, and I was assigned to that project. And so I was traveling back and forth to India, training people here and training trainers here. And I got on the India project. And then when the company decided to start a captive center here, it was only a natural fit that I take that on as well and help people, understand the learning side there. And then when the company was getting sold to another organization, they said, everybody's going to be laid off up to the CEO. But for you, we need you in India. So we're giving you a choice.
Wow.
Be laid off with everybody else, or you can move to India, help us, train our trainers and start a leadership development department so we can promote people from within. So at the time, I'm like, India sounds like a good plan to me. And so
how old were you back then, if I may ask?
30. I was turning 30 that year.
And you moved by yourself?
Yes. I moved by myself and came here and stayed with that company for 3 years. Then I got offered another position, another role with a UK-based company here in India. And then 7 years ago is when I started my own business. I started freelancing initially and thinking I might go back to the corporate world. But then after enjoying freelancing so much, I'm like, I can't go back to the corporate world. I love doing this, and because I'm getting to work with so many different companies of different backgrounds and traveling to different cities, and I don't just travel inside India. I've also been training and coaching in Dubai and Singapore and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Japan and really the APAC region. So what I noticed is 5 years ago is that I wasn't always knowing what happened to the people that I trained. How did it impact them or how did it help them? And I really felt like something was missing. And there were a couple of projects where I didn't get those projects because I was not a certified coach. So I decided in 2015 to go back and get my coaching certification from ICF, International Coaching Federation, so that I could get these long-term leadership journey projects, because I really wanted to be able to make a difference. Because I believe that, if you just take leaders and you send them to a one-day workshop, you're probably not going to see a lot of change. Change happens over time. And what we know, share some research from the Center for Creative Leadership. They have something called the 70-20-10 model, which is that 70% of our learning happens on the job, 20% happens through coaching and mentoring, and only 10% happens through the classroom. So just doing 10% and doing classroom is not enough. So I really started exploring coaching, and I loved coaching so much because it was so much more action oriented. You could actually help people take the knowledge and put it into action. And one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of people make is they go to trainings, they sit in classrooms, they learn. But then if it just stays up here, and if it is not getting utilized or not getting applied, then you're not going to see the results just because you sat in a classroom and got a certificate.
Correct.
So coaching was so powerful because it helps people get into action, and that's where you see the results. And so that's where I started seeing more results, and that resonated with me. And that's where I said, I want to do more of coaching. And and that's how I got into coaching. And I was, again, trained in coaching 19 years ago, but I wasn't really working as a coach. I was using a coaching style as a manager when I had a team. And it was actually one of my team members who told me, Jenny, you should really consider being a coach. And I said, why? He said, because you ask really great questions and you get us thinking and you develop us. And I think that would be a natural fit for you to be a coach. And at first I thought he was just flattering me. But then later on, when I went and studied coaching, it really did resonate with me. And so now I would say, as a business, so my company's name is the Global Quotient, and I specialize in leadership journeys, in developing, 3-month, 6-month, 1-year-long journeys where leaders are getting trained in various competencies that they need to work on. And they're working with one of my coaches, with me or one of my coaches, that is helping them to implement the learning and helping them work wherever they are, because it's different for different leaders. Different leaders need to work on different competencies. So leadership journeys is what I really specialize in now. And I mentor other coaches as well. So I'm a PCC level coach with ICF. So I mentor other coaches to get their ACC credential. And now actually today I'm launching my new trademarked course called Coach the Leader in You, which is a course that combines Jack Canfield's success principles with leadership and coaching. And really, because I believe that, great coaches are great leaders and great leaders are great coaches. So, and even Google did a study in 2015 called the Oxygen Project, where they found that one of the number one skills that effective leaders need is coaching. So we need to be able to coach other people, create other leaders, and develop other people. That is the definition of a leader. A leader is someone who creates other leaders. Coaching becomes a process or a vehicle to be able to do that. So now, instead of me just mentoring already trained coaches, I'm actually going to train people from scratch who want to learn to be a coach, because this is a skill that you can use not only to help coach yourself and help you move ahead and move forward in your own life and your business, but you can do it to help others. And when you do it to help others, that of course build your influence as a leader. So that's a little bit about that.
What an amazing and powerful journey, Jenny. Wow. And I bet moving to a whole different country and, starting a business, that's not easy. That's not easy at all. But what you've done is amazing. And I'm so happy to hear that you're impacting so many people and creating leadership, creating a better leaders around the world, and especially in the Asia Pacific region, and helping people have better people skills. So that's awesome.
Great. Yes.
Wow.
A lot of, adaptability, from my side, to come to, like you said, a new country. And I think it takes, first of all, again, awareness of the people around you and who they are and what's appropriate way of interacting with people in that culture, and respecting that, and being able to meet people where they are, and to work with them. And I think that adaptability is what helped me to adapt here. It also took, I think, a lot of courage to be able to start up a business here, because I don't come from a business family, and I didn't know how to start a business. So I think initially, I don't think I would have taken that jump to say, oh, I'm just going to start a business. It just kind of happened, because I had left my job after having a child, and and just started freelancing. And then after I was kind of freelancing, it was like I was getting my feet wet. I was understanding, and I was like, I could do this. Okay. And so, really what I did was just started with, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? So instead of getting overwhelmed, like with all the things that I need to do to, start a business, grow a business, I just started focusing on the next step. And as I focused on the next step, of course, it got built. And then over time, you build your, reputation. And, I would say, probably, if you look me up on social media, I don't have a lot of stuff out there. I've started a YouTube channel, but I have like one video there. Right. And, just started a Facebook page, like, a couple months ago, because I wasn't really active on social media. I was getting enough of, referrals and through word of mouth, and that's how my business was really growing. And now, of course, being in a changing world, and everybody's going online, I think it's more important to start building an online presence. So now I think in the future you'll start seeing me be online more and more visible, and putting myself out there a little bit more, so people know what I'm doing. And because I think one of the specific areas that I get called to work in with leaders is especially the captive centers here in India, because they are often working with American clients or stakeholders, or even some of the companies, the UK companies that are working with UK clients and stakeholders, because there's a big cultural difference in how, Indians work and how Americans work and how, Britishers work, etc. And because I've lived in all the cultures, I can be a great person to bridge that gap and to help them understand and to work effectively more effectively together. So that is actually one of my specialty areas, because I have been here in India now for 12 and a half years. So I bridge the gap between those cultures to help them work together. So I really call it as global leadership.
Wow.
And, how do we, work on not only our local leadership skills, but how do we become global leaders?
Global leaders. Fantastic. What are some of the, I'm curious to know this, what are some of the struggles that you faced when you first came to India, and what are some things that you love about being here that you didn't have the opportunity to experience elsewhere?
Yeah. So I'll start with the latter part. So I think one of the things that I like about India is the sense of community. People are, very social, and a lot of, gatherings, and, very inclusive, welcoming, and just a friendly nature. And that's one thing I like, because I think, working back in the States, we, tend to kind of go to work and then go home. And so there's a little bit less socializing that happens there. So I really enjoy the sense of community and connection that we have here in India. The first part of your question was around, the challenges and difficulties of adjusting to here. So I think one of those was just understanding some of the unspoken rules of the culture. So for example, when I would ask people on my team, like, okay, can you send this to me by Friday? Sometime I would get the answer like, I'll try. And in America, like, I'll try means 99% it will be done. What I wasn't understanding is that in India, I'll try is like a polite way of saying it's probably not going to happen.
Yes.
And so I didn't understand that as a leader. It was definitely a miscommunication. And so I'd be really disappointed when I didn't get it. And I'd be like, well, why didn't you just tell me? But then I slowly realized that in India, people don't want to say no to their boss. They don't want to disappoint you. And they don't want to be disrespectful by saying no. And so they would use these indirect phrases like, I'll try. And it was complete miscommunication, because, in America, if we can't do something, we'll say it. We'll be more direct in our communication.
Correct.
We'll say, you know what, Friday's going to be difficult, because let's say I'm not in office on Friday and I'll be back on Monday. So can I send it to you on Tuesday? Like, we will actually speak up and negotiate. And that's not perceived as disrespectful. But in India, because there's a lot more hierarchy oftentimes in the organizations and in the upbringing, then the communication style is different, right? So that was actually one of the things that was difficult. So, because I just didn't get it, and it took a while to learn that, oh, that's what that meant, right?
I can totally relate to you because I'm somebody who's lived in the US for about 4 to 5 years. So I have the experience of living in both cultures as well. And I totally resonate with everything that you just said. That's pretty funny.
Yes, yes. So that, I guess that was probably one of the most, difficult things to understand. And yeah. And I would say even the politics that happen in organizations as well was a learning for me, because I wouldn't say it doesn't exist in the States, but I think it just exists in a different way.
Yes.
But in India, I noticed a lot of, politics.
Lots of permutations and combinations in organizational politics. Yeah, it's a whole different thing. Yeah, that's so true. Wow. Yeah, how is the politics different in the US and India, and like how would you picturize it? What's your experience of it?
Yeah, my experience of it in the States, I don't really felt like I experienced it so much. Like, I really felt like as Americans, and I'm generalizing here, is that, we're usually very task oriented. So we kind of believe that our work speaks for itself. So we just do our work, we do our job, and there's not as much drive to get promoted. So in the US, most of the organizations are a little flatter in the structures as compared to India, where there's more hierarchy and more levels and layers built in. So in America, it's really common to find some people in the same position for 20 years, for 30 years, and they're completely fine with that. Whereas in India, when I would work with leaders here, after 1 year, people are saying, where's my promotion? Where's my promotion? And they want to get promoted like every year. And that's very different than the States. So what happens is that changes the behavior that people have. So because if a person's wanting to get promoted, then they need to showcase their skills and abilities, and they need to talk about what they've done. And then the other thing that I've seen happen is not only do they talk about what great they have done and showcase what they've done, but they oftentimes talk about what other people have not done so that they can make themselves look better in comparison to others, to position themselves for that promotion compared to others. And,
Correct.
And I think this is partly driven by the bell curve performance rating system that often exists here in a lot of the Indian companies, which I had never experienced back in the States. And I think that drives to a lot of competitive behavior. Actually, I am not somebody who recommends that system at all. I really think that organizations need to move away from measuring, let's say, performance and putting people against each other. Because I've, managed teams, and it's always a difficult time for a leader after a performance appraisal cycle, because you've got your top 5%, which are really happy. And if you have a small team, that's like one person. And then you got everybody else who's not happy because they were not, at that position. So then they're really demotivated. And so then they start, doing a lot of other behaviors that, are not very productive because they're upset that they didn't get promoted. And so I really think, companies need to move to a more developmental approach and have more ongoing developmental conversations and coaching conversations on a regular basis, and feedback to improve performance, and to let, budgets and leaders decide how to allocate those, not by putting a number on people's heads. So I really think that system is broken in so many ways. And I see that with every organization that I consult with as well, because you've got a very small percentage that's happy with it. They're usually the people that got the good rating and the good promotion or good increase in their salary, whereas the rest are really dissatisfied with it. So I think the system is not doing what it's meant to be doing, and it's doing more harm than good. So so the negative side of that system, it's not a problem with the people as much as it's a problem with the system, is that because people are in constant competition, they feel a need to show that they're doing better and that other people are doing bad. So what happens is, behavior-wise, people tend to go and start pulling down other people as opposed to raising up themselves. And that's the kind of politics that I see here in India. And it can go as far as, just telling half-truths or telling lies or different things, or just, highlighting where the other person has done something wrong, and might be one thing, but that's the one thing that gets remembered. Because, again, as humans, we have negativity bias, which is the tendency to focus on what is negative and to focus on what is wrong. And so that's why as leaders, we again have to be aware of our biases. And I think we have to ask ourselves, okay, what's the whole picture here? And do I have the whole picture when I'm making a decision? Have I just relied on this one story that I've heard from this one person, but what's the other side of the story? And then, collect your information and look at it more holistically. Otherwise, your view or your perspective is already skewed. Your perception is only from one angle.
Wow. That's powerful, and that's a whole wrap back to from the beginning of our conversation about bias to the end. Jenny, this has been awesome. What an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for just letting the floodgates of knowledge out during this conversation for us. Lastly, do you have any questions for me? Any questions that you have for me?
Nothing else that I can think of you for, Naren. I think I just wanted to share one piece of value with everybody before we wrap up, and that is something that I learned from my mentor, Jack Canfield. And I think every leader needs to know this. And it's this formula that says E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals our outcome. So no matter what situation we're in, the outcome of it is going to be determined by our response to that situation. And that is a formula that I live by, and that I think we need not only to lead ourselves, to ask ourselves, how are we responding to the situation that creates our outcome? And if I connect this back to this whole lockdown situation that we, are in right now, okay, we have a lockdown that's outside of our control. Now, I have a choice on how I respond to it. I can, sit at home and say, okay, I'm going to wait for things to open up. And that's going to impact my outcome, right? As an entrepreneur, I'm not going to have income, let's say, if I take that approach, right? Or if I choose the response to say, okay, I am at home. It is what it is. What can I do? And what can I even change or do differently that will impact the outcome that I have? So I think this is something it's a life skill, it's a success principle, and it's something that all leaders need to know, is that it's not the event itself. It's our response to the event that creates our outcome. So this is the last bit, I think, of knowledge.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm so lucky that you mentioned that. It's because, when I started this podcast, we were having people come in to where we were recording the thing, and it was live. But the lockdown happened, and that couldn't happen anymore. And because of that, I had to change my approach. Okay, let's make this on Zoom, and let's record this and go live. Because of that, my outcome has become even better, because now I'm able to interview people from all around the world for them who's not possible to fly in. So you're so right. And as soon as you said that, I could relate, and I could see how the outcome became better just because my response changed in that particular situation. So
Exactly. So, I know there's been some negative impacts of this situation, but it's what we do with it. And maybe beforehand you would have, your mindset would have thought that it's impossible to do things on Zoom, or it's not going to be as effective if it's online, because that would have just been the story that you're telling yourself. And now that you have no other choice and you're doing it anyway, now you're actually seeing the, outcome of it, right? So I think this is, again, another learning that we have. And this is what I learn, and that's what I love about coaching, is that the learning often comes from taking the action, because that's where you get the learning, right? Now you've got the learning that it's even better. And if you had not tried it, you wouldn't have never have known that. But the fact that you've taken action and you've done it, now you see, as opposed to making an assumption about what will happen, right? So I think the learning comes from taking action. And I think this is an important part of leadership and of life, is that, it's not a failure, it's a learning. That in life, whatever it is, it's it's our ability to learn from the situation that helps us grow. And the more failures you have, the closer you are to success, because the more you've learned.
Wow. Just amazing gems of knowledge right there. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being on the show and sharing your story with us. What a pleasure. And this episode is going to be so valuable to anybody who listens to this. So thank you once again for being on the show. And we hope to see you again sometime soon in the future.
Thank you so much, Naren. Thank you.